People of Reddit who have been in a coma for a long period of time. What news really shocked you when you found out what happened? I was in a coma for 2.5 months in 2015 when I was 27 following a serious car accident. When I woke up I still had a tracheotomy and couldn't speak. I don't remember a dang thing from the time I was in a coma, but what blew my mind is when I woke up my new boyfriend at the time was standing there with my parents and they were chatting to each other like they knew each other. I am a super private and had made every effort for them to not even know of him, so I found this disturbing. I also had no recollection of the accident for months, and for a week or two after waking up I had to be retold where I was and what had happened every time I dozed off and woke up. I had no idea where I was and I thought I was 23, not 27 for months. I also had a really hard time recognizing faces. Like I would see people I knew that I knew, but I couldn't remember why or their names or anything. They would just look familiar. One time about a month after I had woken up, my parents took me in my hospital bed for a walk in the courtyard of the hospital. We passed a large mirror in the lobby and I freaked out. I saw my reflection and I knew it was me because I recognized my parents pushing the bed, but I didn't recognize my own face. There were no injuries to my face or anything, I just didn't recognize myself. It also blew my mind that I had gone into the coma in late winter and there was quite a bit of snow on the ground, and when I woke up it was spring and there was no snow. I had a large window in my hospital room. The news that shocked me the most was the fact that my parents had gone in and packed up my entire apartment. Like I mentioned, I was super private and the idea that they went in there and boxed up all my stuff and gave up my lease was hard to grasp. Obviously it made sense, but I was troubled by it. Open to questions. I don't know if this counts because it was only 3 weeks, but I was so shaken when someone put on the TV and it was a newsreel about a festival in a town over. I wasn't even going to go. I just felt so weird because this was still like 3 weeks away, you know? This can't be on TV. Did I just miss 3 whole weeks? Oh crap. WTF happened? I was in a coma. Oh yeah, something bad happened to me. What happened? Explosion. I'm not going into the details of the accident, but it was an explosion on the work floor that threw a piece of metal straight towards me. Tried to catch it my arms and then my face. Didn't catch it, the wall did though, and it had a huge hole in it. Still don't get how I didn't die that day. I destroyed my upper and lower jaw, my arm, pinky, and burned most of my limbs. Mostly 2nd degree, so that wasn't really the problem. The problem was the jaws and the arm. My jaws were completely shattered into more than 100 pieces. The doctor told me he had to put pieces of bone in random places because he couldn't find the right spot they came from. Lost most of my teeth, about 3/4 of them. My lower lip was ripped off and was just hanging by one blood vessel and a few nerves. After 10 years I still don't have all feeling back, but that's the new normal, so I don't really notice anymore. And the arm was broken on the lower half. Both bones snapped like little trees and one of the bones sticking out of a gaping wound. Fun times. Holy crap dude, hope the company paid for it. When I was a kid I was messing around in our house that was under construction. I fell through the open floor to the floor below. My brother saw me land on my head and called 911. I woke up the next day watching TV and eating Teddy Grahams in the hospital. Then I don't remember anything until a few days later when I was at home. My parents said I was never unconscious because I was complaining the entire time, and I was able to eat and use the restroom on my own. But I don't remember a thing. I'm colorblind where I have a hard time seeing green. It comes across as blue, gray, or brown most of the time. Yellow and purple are also hard for me. I didn't actually realize I was colorblind for a few years. I found out that the type I have can be caused by head injury. Wife was in a medically induced coma, which is really just heavy sedatives and paralytics, for 13 days. She had complications from a bilateral lung transplant. The hardest part for her was she had very realistic dreams during where she went home and came back to the hospital. So the first few times they woke her up, reducing the medications to check for neurological function, she was fairly panicked. So I got in the habit of telling her the daytime and location each time they woke her, letting her know she was safe. It was extra hard on her as she was on a ventilator and restrained, so she couldn't communicate what she wanted to know. Interestingly, we were able to often tell what part of the dream responded to different events of her stay in the ICU. That was in February. She still sometimes has to ask if things she remembers really happened or if they were part of the dreams. Good news, she's home now. Nearly fully recovered with just some mild kidney problems that are getting better and some neuropathy in her left leg. She's able to walk with a walker and do a lot of things on her own again. Your wife is a tough cookie. Bilateral lung transplants are tough. Keep on keeping on. I'm not one, but when my husband came out of a long period of unconsciousness in the hospice, he thought that the footstool was a dog and kept patting it. We all played along and called it a good boy for the rest of the time there. Not me, but my niece was in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks after doing MRIing her heart. She says that she could remember hearing her mom and dad in the room during a couple points, and that her anesthesia was lightened at about 1 week, and as an attempt to wake her up, she was aware of it but didn't become conscious. She said that it was like being underwater, so you can sort of hear what people are saying but not fully understand. She was extremely surprised and confused when she finally came to and couldn't believe that she was out for so long. The last thing she remembers was snorting what she thought was coke and then her boyfriend calling 911. She is insanely lucky to be alive, but will live with consequences of this for the rest of her life. She has permanent damage to her heart and will likely die if she does anything like that again. Interesting. Never knew what too much M could do. I did a stupid crazy amount of M in one go once. Was during an argument, and we had no idea what it was going to do to me. QH to bring me down. And down it brought me. Does 3 weeks count as a long time? I was in a motorcycle accident, was out for 3 weeks. Woke up as the person I am today, not really as the person before, although I have a few of his memories. Found out that my hippocampus was damaged, so that accounted for the memory loss. I woke up remember a lot of school stuff and things I read before, but had a very hard time remembering knowing people. Didn't totally recognize my dad. Had no idea who my mom was. I was apparently dating a really pretty girl, but I have no idea who she was. No memory of her. We tried to make it work, but it was too weird. The old me was too different from the new me, and I felt no connection to her. I did become really good at philosophy and logic after I woke up. Ended up going to college to study it. Got a year left before I can lecture in it as well. So I guess that's a plus. It's still weird, sometimes people will approach me and greet me. They know so much about me, but I have no idea who they are. I usually have to explain to them what happened, and things get a little weird sometimes, but usually end up remaking a friend. My grandpa's biggest shock waking from a coma was the news he wasn't in Spain. He was hit by a car near his house, England, and a lot of the nurses in it were Spanish, and he caught their accent and thinks they sometimes spoke to each other in Spanish. They aren't meant to. We don't care. He had excellent care. And maybe when he started opening his eyes briefly, he saw their skin tone. He couldn't understand how he had got to Spain. When he was coming around, he was getting distressed. We kept telling him he was okay. He was in hospital and the tube was helping him breathe. We forgot to share the news you have not left the country. He was also shocked to find his feet hadn't been amputated. His feet and ankles weren't injured. About the only bit of him which wasn't. But somehow in the coma he thought they were. When fully conscious, he was shocked at the football results. This doesn't count as a long time, but I was put in a medically induced coma for 2 days due to an attempted suicide via overdose. The weirdest thing was that when I was waking up, I could have sworn that the foot of the bed was pointing towards the window, but when I came to fully, the window was to my right. My bed was never oriented differently. Another thing is that I have a memory from the night before I woke up, where I heard a family friend and my dad talking about scuba diving. I also had a couple auditory hallucinations a couple days after waking up as well. Lastly, a funny thing, as the nurse was taking out my breathing throat tube, they pumped my stomach. I immediately said thanks in a breathy rasp once it was out. The nurse laughed and said that I was the first person to ever thank her for doing that. I was in a coma for 3 or 4-ish days after an intentional OD on Ambien, Regulin, antidepressants mixed with some alcohol. I was more or less just unconscious, but I remember the first time I woke up, it was exactly like those movies where you're flashing in and out and there are disembodied voices everywhere and people working on you. It was very weird. I remember waking up a few times once I was out of critical condition, mainly to throw up from the Narcan. Apparently, I had a seizure, I had cyanosis, blood was coming from my mouth and nose, my blood sugar dropped below survivable and then shot up into diabetic coma zone after a glycerine shot. I was severely underweight and I guess they didn't take that into account, and I had a breathing tube for most of the time. When I woke up, all I knew was that my throat was very sore and my entire body felt like actual chewed up garbage. Other than that, I had no clue what happened. I just remember taking everything and falling asleep and that was it. Stories like this are why even at my darkest moments I haven't been all that tempted to OD. Any other way, sure, but OD, nope, frick that. What a horrible fricking thing to come back to. That it isn't like you see in movies. Nothing happens when you're in a coma. Your brain just shuts off. You know when you're little and you stay the night at a friend's house. When you wake up you can't remember where you're at and get nervous for a second until you remember. That's exactly what it feels like to wake up from a coma, but it never finally clicks. I woke up from a 2-month coma after a bad wreck where I broke my neck, hip, couldn't walk, etc. I could tell I was in the hospital but didn't know why or what happened. For some reason I thought I was 60, and I had been comatose for 30 years. In fact, I had been in a coma for 2 months and was in my late 20s. Doctors are amazed I survived a 2-month coma, which is very unlikely, so this may be the longest period of time you'll get a legit answer. But of course people always have stories that are like, my cousin was in a 3-year coma and said, however, it's insanely rare that people will wake up after even months. I'm an open book, so any other questions, ask. 2 weeks because of swine flu. During this time Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV running in my room and the drugs they gave me to keep me under gave the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. My dad also got swine flu. They put him in an induced coma, but after 33 days and complete organ system failures, he never woke up. I'll leave the traumatic stuff out. The last thing he said before he was put under was a frantic "please don't. I'll never wake up." He was right. I'm so glad you made it out okay. Not coma, but an anesthesia experience. I remember waking up with a really hard erection. Tried standing up, almost fell over. The girl tried to catch me and I said, "I got this." Then I stumbled into the hallway and passed out. I wasn't in a coma, but I had a, to me, serious concussion. I woke up with no memory of anything at all. When things finally started coming back to me, a dog ran up to me and I started petting it. I looked at my dad and asked when we got this dog because I didn't remember ever getting him. Long story short, it wasn't our dog. My dad tells this story to his friends and says that's when I knew you were fricked up. I have epilepsy and have been in a brief coma due to dropping and knocking. I don't recall how long it was, or anything about it really, just what I'm told. I woke up really confused and for some reason the first thing I did was try to leave so I could, and I quote, "go home and smoke a J." The nurses explained what happened while stifling laughter. I tried to walk out even though I had all sorts of crap hooked up to me. Didn't even notice it though. I pulled all-nighters when I was 15 or so and I decided to see how long I could go while on spring break. I stayed up around 5 days, but the 5th day I crashed I don't know when and I slept on the couch. Woke up feeling kinda groggy, mostly hungry and thirsty. Wasn't surprised though, as all-nighters do that to you. Just one will. And according to my family I slept for about 32 hours and got up to pee 2 times that I don't remember. You end up so confused about the time and day of the week. Also, I didn't realize how hungry I was till I ate, then it hurt like I was starving. Drank a lot of Gatorade to rehydrate after that. I had conversations that didn't actually happen and all sorts of crap just out of sight and auditory was heck considering I also have tinnitus and the constant ringing along with all of it is not fun. Around the 4th day I was getting it and from there it got worse. Probably didn't help my diet during this was canned beans and iced tea. I don't even want to think about how that probably hurt my insides like my liver. All the things I thought I heard or seen helps me understand a little bit what my uncle goes through with his severe schizophrenia. Voices shadow people and stuff like that. You won't find many if any real replies to this. The truth is, people who have been in a coma for a long time wake up brain damaged. The trope of waking up after years of being in a coma and being okay is not something that happens in real life. Someone who has been in a coma for years will wake up a vegetable. Granted, it was not a coma, only a trip to Albania. It is quite similar. I was there for 6 months in 2013 and when I returned I was told there had been 3 Australian Prime Ministers while I was gone. Only 5 more Prime Ministers till Christmas. Remember to change your smoke alarm battery at least once every Prime Minister. It wasn't a long time because realistically, people who go into long comas usually don't recover or fully arise into consciousness. I had an appendectomy on my 11th birthday. I had gone sepsis because when I started getting ill 3 weeks earlier, I didn't tell my parents. Our sewage pipes had burst in the basement and I didn't want to bother them with another thing gone wrong. Around the start of week 2 they caught on that I had the flu. In the 3rd week my mom was concerned because I couldn't walk and was starting to fade in and out of consciousness, and was rapidly declining. Talia with me lived in the children's hospital for several months. Well, because so much time had gone by, a lot of the tissue in my abdomen had died and I was severely dehydrated. So when they cut me open, they severed an artery. This made a simple procedure a lot more complicated, and they had to up my anesthesia to give them more time to fix me. It's kind of like in the movies where you catch glimpses of things and fade in and out, without any time in the middle. I was out for 2-3 days. I remember hearing crying, me, and a blurry bright light. When I came to, I was scared because I was in a hospital room that was clearly lived in. But the last thing I remembered was being in the waiting area to be rolled back into surgery. There was nothing in between. I remember I was hysterical when I woke up because of how scary the feeling was. They actually put me back to sleep for the rest of the day and woke me up slowly because of how hard it was to wake up instantly. As I woke up slowly, I could hear my parents and siblings, and I was able to realize that the surgery was over and that I was okay. My surgeon came and talked to me about anesthesia and what I was feeling. I was okay after that and made a quick, full recovery. Glad you made a full recovery and thanks for sharing what it was like. Was not for a long time. I was overdosed on anesthesia after an ingrown toenail operation. I slept for over 24 hours, was just gone. But as I first passed out in the way home from the operation, my parents decided to just carry me to my room and let me sleep. Came up and checked on me. As I seemed fine, they just let me be. Got drugged for the operation before lunch the first day. Fell asleep in the car home. Was gone that full day, till the next day late at night. So maybe 36 hours or so, but yeah. Waking up, not remembering anything and thinking you just have been gone for like a few minutes. But it's dark when you wake up, and as you get downstairs they tell you have been out for pretty much 2 days. Like you felt fine, but everything just felt wrong as well. Your body and mind is just confused. It was weird, not something I hope to experience again. In 2003, I was in a high-speed rollover, and as a result, spent a few days in a coma. When I woke, I was shocked to find myself in a hospital. I called my mom and asked her if she could bring me a cigarette. She told me that she couldn't. I had total down. I asked if she could just walk over. We lived close to our local hospital, but she told me that I was in Denver, that they'd had to flight for life me there. It was very distressing to me, both my location and that I'd rolled out of van. She told me that she'd be there as soon as my dad got back to the house. Even after talking to my folks and the doctors, it was very hard to process what had happened. To this day, I only have extremely faint memories of looking at the clock on the dashboard and zero recollection of roughly a week's worth of time preceding it. Literally just a blank spot in my memory. That is still very uncomfortable to me. Apparently I had actually woken up a day or two earlier than I can remember, had already seen my folks and answered questions for both the doctors and police officers. I can't remember any of that either. I wanted to add that a week or so later, I had one more scary experience related to the incident. We went to the junkyard where the destroyed van was, and seeing just how completely totaled it was broke me. I sobbed and shook and couldn't believe I'd lived through it. It was absolutely mangled. Well, I'm glad you did make it. I woke up after a 3-day coma to my dad sitting at the edge of the bed. The first thing he said was, "Oh, thank God you're awake. I didn't know when you were going to come around." "Oh, you're finally awake. Ah, pun resistance, I got you." Half my family and a few friends legitimately thought I passed away due to a poorly worded Facebook post. Day after the hospital discharged me, I found my Instagram and Facebook flooded with people mourning or apologizing. Ellen Page came out as a lesbian. I was in a 3-week coma, but that was about the only interesting thing that happened. I had a sedate head injury. I don't quite recall the specifics of the swelling, but I was out for a little over 5 days, they said. I woke up as if someone had turned a light back on. I immediately tried to get up. I thought I was still on the mountain I was skiing. My dad got in a really bad car accident about 20 years ago, and when he woke up from being in a coma, he thought my mother had had a second child and that his last name was Moon, neither of which were true, obviously. I was in a coma for 2 weeks after I fell from a car and hit my head on the road. A few days after I woke up, they done some tests on me and were asking me general knowledge questions that I was having no issues with. Then the doctor asks me who is the current prime minister. This was easy because a few months before my incident, Kevin Rudd had just become elected. I got the question wrong because whilst I was in a coma they had been a re-election. Australian BTW. I was in hospital for around 2 months in 2016 in the event of a car accident. I had no working internet connection or TV for the longest time. As I came home, everybody was speaking of Pokemon Go, and on my way home I saw big chunks of people, young and old, pointing their faces towards their phones and having a blast running around. Instead of a very long coma, I've been unconscious coma for half a night. When I woke up, my parents were right beside my bed in the IC. I asked them what has happened, even though I sort of knew what happened. Really weird experience. I was in a coma for 2 months the year the Patriots went undefeated but lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, and that blew me away, lol. It also was super emotional because watching football was something I did with my dad, and when we watched the game together he broke down telling me how he thought we were never gonna get to see another game together. Not as long as some other people, but 3 days after a motorcycle accident when I was in middle school. I've told this story a few times, but I'll repeat it because it is relevant. When I was unconscious, I dreamed I had a life and lived a full life. It was as though the accident never happened. I finished school, graduated high school, went to college, dated people, graduated college, met my future wife, got married, changed jobs, had kids. Those kids graduated college and had kids of their own, and my wife and I lived until she died of cancer. When I woke up, it was devastating. I have these memories of this other life that was completely unreal. I have love for these people that were never real. I can see my kids' faces, my grandchildren's faces, and they never existed. I've never been able to remember my wife's face. I remember everything else about her, but her face. I'll have dreams or memories of this other life. Even today, 17 years later, I can recall, with perfect clarity, this other life, nearly every single detail, and they haunt me. They are never altered, or, I should say, until relatively recently, they were never changed. I met my current girlfriend a couple of years ago, but we started dating only about 6 months ago. A few months ago, my dreams changed, but only slightly. I could see my wife's face, and they are my current girlfriend's face. Nothing else has changed, but it is her. I cannot explain it. Nothing else has changed. The person in my dreams has always been her. I sound like a crazy person, but that is the truth as I know it. My aunt was not in a coma for long, just a few days. She had a major heart attack and was down for like a half hour or more. The doctors etc. called it a miracle she ended up mostly okay. They think a lot due to her age. They actually did body cooling for a day or two while she was in the coma, bringing her body temperature below normal to try to help, and it seems to have. When she woke she was so confused. She thought it was months earlier. The grandma was in the hospital, kept asking where her kids were, 8 and 13 at the time. She barely remembers much from the next month or two. Her first memories were in the rehab hospital. So for her, with the brain being without oxygen, even though she was only in a coma a few days, it was like she lost half a year of time. I was for 9 days last June. I was mostly shocked and angry and upset that I wasn't dead. It was due to a suicide attempt. Nice you're still here equals. Back in October, I was in a coma for a week, then out but being woken up sporadically for the next few weeks to prevent brain damage. There is a little bit of brain damage, but not as bad as it would have been if I had been in the coma for the whole month. I was also in and out of surgery in those few weeks and they had me doped up on fentanyl. My abdomen was basically just left open in this time, so I couldn't tell you what was actually coma related or if it was due to anything else. But here's what I experienced. I thought I was a dead bird being frozen to the ground. When the freezing process was done, my consciousness would be set free. I thought I was a dead fish defrosting in a stream. I thought the people talking around me wanted to eat me. I thought I was about 200 miles north of where I was. I think this is from being woken up. One of the docs had Taos on his jacket. Despite us being in Albuquerque, I could not ascertain why I would be in Taos. I thought I had gotten into an argument with my fiancé, drove south to pick up my truck, then headed north. I haven't had that truck in 10 years, but used it when I was driving to Taos for work, so it made sense. I thought I had been in a very bad car accident, instead of becoming septic after getting my small bowel nicked during my tubal ligation. I hallucinated a lot. I thought I was in 9 different rooms ranging from an animal hospital to a hotel to a cruise ship to a hotel. I thought I had taken my fiancé and daughter on vacation to a beach. What I could not believe was how little time had passed. I thought I was a year gone, not a month. I still have trouble remembering how old I am. My friend was in a really bad car accident. She was T-boned, but survived. She was in a coma for a good month or two. When she came out of it, she had basically regressed to her younger self. After she was released from the hospital and came home, she was a lot like a 14-16-year-old and basically had to regrow up. It was kind of wild. She is all good now with just a slight speech problem but is married with 2 kids. Not me obviously. There was a Canadian guy and his American wife who were held hostage in the Middle East for several months and he 100% thought they were fricking with him when they kept telling him Donald Trump was president. I used to be a cop but I was shot on duty. The surgeon saved my life but I slipped into a coma. When I woke up a few months later, my wife had dumped me on minimum care and took off to hook up with my old partner and had taken my son with her. I had to travel cross country to even find them. When I did, there was an altercation between me and my old partner that ended when my son shot him. I was flying a plane and crashed in 1944. I woke up in 2011 and joined the Avengers and fought aliens. So what shocked me was aliens. I understood that reference. Not a coma, but I've woken up after a bad concussion. The last thing I remember before waking up on the ground was stepping onto the crosswalk before looking both ways. Next thing I knew, I was being called out to, surrounded by people, feeling really groggy and confused while they told me I was hit by a car. I was pretty shocked upon finding that out. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.